Thank you for such a warm welcome, Katie, and thank you everyone for being here today to celebrate International Women's Day. As President Hemdelapur mentioned in his welcoming remarks, International Women's Day is part of a movement that's growing and evolving. It has developed in reach and impact around the world. Women's rights have grown by leaps and bounds, but there are yet a number of large-scale challenges creating a headwind against positive change. Wage inequality, lack of female representation in government and corporate leadership roles, toxic power dynamics, access to education in the developing world. These issues are complex, as are their solutions, and we need to strike hard to tackle them. So this is a famous photo from the 1927 Solvay Conference for Physics and Chemistry in Belgium. In the photo, there are brilliant minds. You might recognize Albert Einstein, Werner Heisenberg, Niels Bohr. They're all seated or standing together. It's a wonderful photo to look at and think about all the discoveries and breakthroughs that have been made by these pioneering scientists. Out of the 29 scientists in the photo, there is a woman. And this is just amazing for 1927. There in the front row, second from the left, is Marie Curie. After struggling through political discourse and persecution that limited her family's prospects, she also battled depression at a young age. And after being denied the opportunity to study at a traditional university in her native Poland, Marie fought convention and misogyny to thrive as a tremendously gifted scientist. Out of the 29 people in that photograph, 17 would go on to win Nobel Prizes. But Curie would be the only one to be awarded Nobel Prizes in 2 scientific disciplines. You might think in terms of what this photo represents with regard to diversity in the academy, that we've come a long way since then. Of course, in many ways, things indeed have changed. More women are represented in the academic and scientific community than ever before. But in some fields of study, we are seeing less diversity and representation of women. In my first job, as a newly minted professor in a science faculty in 1988, I walked into faculty council meeting to discuss a highly controversial item that had drawn the attention of everybody in the faculty. I walked into a sea of men to realize that I was the only female professor out of more than 200. I continued to what I would call unfortunate trailblazing by being the only female full professor in the faculty, and now we're talking about 15 years ago. I don't think that we can be satisfied by incremental equity and diversity that takes generations to develop. Wholesale change is needed on a global scale, and it must come from individuals coming together who are dedicated to change. We all have our labels, and I have the privilege to have many. I am a woman of color, and I'm also an indigenous woman from Trinidad. During my life, I've learned that we are more than the labels that society gives, but labels sometimes hinders people. When I was young, it was not so unusual to see girls in school. My mother had a very different experience. When she was 11 years old, she left school. She had wanted to be a teacher, and she brazenly signed up for an entrance exam to further her studies to become a teacher despite her father's wishes. Her father, as was common at the time, felt that all girls need not attend school beyond the early years, and her father won the battle. She was sent out to work and made to look bigger and older as she took a sales job. In my mother's words, I never felt so sick having to go to work and passing all the others going to school. All the others, her brothers, and all the other young men. Although my mother did not go to school, she made sure that her girls received education. And every day, like a routine, when we came home from school, she will grill us on what we learned. What were the key new teachings? It was a ritual we didn't escape. Well, possibly to make sure that her girls were paying attention, and possibly so that she could learn as well. My mother was a trailblazer. So, next slide, please. Coconuts are popular in the Caribbean. Everyone loves coconut water. I do too. In fact, my favorite drink is gin and coconut water. But coconut trees are very hard to climb. You've got to be very agile and very careful. You're seeing what it's like there. My mother told me a story about when she was a girl, and her brothers validated it for me. The boys would stand below a coconut tree and argue who might try to climb it. As you see, coconut tree climbing is not for the weak-hearted. It's treacherous, and even experienced climbers fall, severely injuring themselves. None of the boys would dare to try to make the ascent up the 10-meter tall trees, but she did. All the boys would gather around the tree, and my mother would use a pair of pants from one of the boys and make her way up the tree, barefoot, slow, and steady. On the top, she would throw the coconuts down to the boys waiting below. Once she had done it the first time, the boys would call to her, and they'd have a pair of pants ready for her to make the climb. Thank you. We can stop that. The fearlessness she displayed even as a child, I believe, was instrumental in shaping how I view challenges. I'll mention that my indigenous roots come from my mother's side, and they are warrior tribe roots. In fact, I'm so sorry to say that they are part cannibal. But anybody who knows me knows that I'm paying for that in spades now. Since I was 20, I've been a vegetarian. While I didn't have many female academic role models, as you heard in my life, my mother instilled in me determination. So I took this message and I followed my passion, which happened to be mathematics. And there were so few women in mathematics at that time. Regardless of entrenched societal barriers and the barriers in higher education for women, with the help of many supportive parents, teachers, professors, and peers, I paved a road for my own future. I earned a PhD in statistics right here at the University of Waterloo, and I can tell you that the support I received here for following my passion was just phenomenal. Obtaining a PhD in statistics was no easy feat. As anyone who's gone through the doctoral process knows, it's challenging from an academic and even a personal perspective. Of course, I decided to add to my challenge. I chose to start my family as I pursued my PhD. I was actually in my final trimester as I was wrapping up or completing in the last stages of my PhD. I knew the trials ahead of me, and I didn't want to fall behind, or at least I didn't want to look like I was falling behind. So in the final weeks of pregnancy, I worked tirelessly to build up a portfolio of work that would enable me to stay 6 weeks ahead of my supervisor. I got new results, and in fact, I got a major breakthrough, and I did lots of simulations to validate methods, but I never showed them to him. I worked through the night, and I stockpiled work. It was really taxing mentally and physically. My son was only 1 week old when I returned to my PhD studies. With the help of 6 weeks' worth of work I had completed, I was able to stay on pace with my supervisor. And he was just amazed with the progress in those early weeks. He thought he was dealing with a powerhouse, which was absolutely misplaced given that I had cheated. Instead, secretly, and I I will confess, I was managing postnatal depression and a new baby who wanted to be fed every 2 hours, and figuring out just exactly how much I should dole out to my supervisor so that, when the time came for me to work, I would be at the right place. But because he was so convinced that I was a superpower, as I said, through my cheating, that really gave me a lot of confidence to move forward. I had no maternity leave, no structures or policy to help support me during this time. But I was able to push through the difficult process with the help of my supervisor. Many talented and hardworking female scholars are discouraged at the lack of work-life balance in front of them. The prospect of putting their personal and home life on hold to pursue a career in higher education and research can be quite disheartening. There are policies in place now to help support graduate students at the University of Waterloo who are having children. Wonderful policies, parent leave bursary, daycare bursary, but this is only one side of the equation. We still need a lot of work. For example, in making sure there's a really good understanding of what is expected of women who've had maternity leaves in terms of productivity and accommodations. I was also proud to be part of the driving force to create a policy at NSERC with regards accommodating female faculty, bringing caregivers. So during a time when I was on an NSERC committee, I remember bringing my second son to NSERC committee meetings in order to nurse him. So it was my second year at an NSERC committee. I had my son, and the NSERC staff had to make a decision to replace me on the committee or to support me through the meetings. And they decided to test the waters and support me through the meetings. So where no policy existed, they paid for a caregiver to come with me to meetings to care for my son. And I had such a generous and supportive committee to work with. They took mid-morning and mid-afternoon breaks to allow me to feed my baby. This was a precursor of the policy that NSERC eventually had in order to support women who have children, to give them opportunities to bring their caregivers to meetings. Policy is only half the battle. We need to change culture. Culture in the university environment, culture in industry, to be more accepting of unique situations that mothers and women face within an academic environment. Bringing my son was a necessity for both of us. He needed to be fed, I wanted to be with him, and I also wanted to be at the meeting. The culture of our institutions and colleagues is changing to be a welcoming one for these situations, which is a positive sign. I never felt like I was being disruptive. We cannot let stigma follow new mothers. It's imperative that we make these subtle but important changes in culture in order to attract and retain talented female faculty members and researchers in all disciplines. If we don't, our institutions will lose out on the opportunities that their unique skills and knowledge can contribute to society. The University of Waterloo, through the very dedicated work, and this is one of the reasons I came here, of President Hamdulapur, Diana Parry, and the Equity Office, the provost, the deans, and the countless individuals on campus, has made progress on equity file. I am personally committed to the exploration of equity issues for research leaders on campus. Female faculty representation is about 30%, which is an improvement from our 2013 benchmarks, but there's room for lots more improvement. And as of 2016, we have 20% of full professors in Canada are women. And though the entrepreneurship file is such a signature at Waterloo, women entrepreneurship here is a rarity. And equally rare are women in executive positions in industry. Mentorship is a strong form of positive encouragement. This can be as simple as faculty members and graduate students fostering curiosity in undergraduate students exploring careers in higher education. We need to show girls and young women there are positive examples of women who are thriving in academic and research-intensive careers. And we're going to have to work harder. Millennials have a very different view of what is work-life balance. And so for that generation, we have to show even greater diligence as we navigate with them to achieve equity. We also need more women to become leaders in education and research. Creating the right environment means ensuring policies and procedures are in place. Those in leadership positions can become advocates and sponsors far more effectively and with such greater impact, and we have a responsibility to do so.